Chief?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here this morning, and it's a very momentous occasion here with the Premier and Minister Rickford. We also, I'm here with my associates. I'm glad to be here at this event, and it's a long time coming. I think it's been 2 years since we first announced the Northern Road Link, the start of it, and we're now here with the completion of the terms of reference, and we'll be releasing it at the end of this month. So with that, you know, it's a start of a journey for us into economic reconciliation for Marten Falls First Nation and our neighboring 𝗏𝗏𝗺𝗏 First Nation communities, including our partners Webequie First Nation, who has been on this journey with us side by side. And I also want to acknowledge my fellow Chief Cornelius Wabasse of Webequie First Nation, who is on Zoom today, and we sat down together in Thunder Bay yesterday, and he told me he could not make it, but he'll be here in Zoom. But with that, you know, it's a very great occasion for us, for our members. On behalf of Marten Falls First Nation, I'd like to thank the Premier, and we'd like to thank Minister Rickford for all the work, and our associates and our staff with the Northern Road Link. They've done a lot of work to come this far, and there's a lot of work still to do. We're going to be moving on to the actual work of the environmental assessment, moving forward with the actual studies that are going to be happening. And you know, we're glad to move forward on this with the environmental assessment that's happening on our traditional lands, Marten Falls First Nation. And you know, it's something that we're very proud of, and we want to move forward in a good way, moving with all the responsibilities that we have to do under environmental assessment. As I said, this is a move forward. This is a move forward for us in terms of economic reconciliation, alleviating the conditions in the community, the poverty levels that we have faced in the decades past. You know, recently I had announced a state of emergency on education. And you know, there's a lot of work to do in those socioeconomic areas and within our community and within our neighboring 𝗏𝗏𝗺 First Nation communities. So with that, I want to say thank you to the Premier, again to Minister Rickford and Northern Road Link.
Thank you, Chief Bruce, for your thoughtful comments. Now from Thunder Bay via Zoom call, as the Chief mentioned, we have Chief Cornelius Wabasse of Webequie First Nation. Good morning, Chief.
Don?
You ready to go, Chief?
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're coming live from the Grand Canyon, unless we can change this.
Yeah.
Here, we're getting a big echo.
Yeah. Not sure what's causing the echo there.
Maybe you can put his cell phone mute, but he can still speak. I don't know if that.
Okay, just a second. Cell phone.
Okay.
Mute.
So.
Chief Wabasse, are you there?
Mike Fox has got him on a screen there.
His mic is down. Hello, Chief, are you there?
Yeah,
There we go. Are you ready to go?
yes, I am.
Okay, if you want to give your remarks.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Mhm.
Okay, all right, I'll just begin. Good morning, everybody. My name is Cornelius 𝗏𝗏𝗺𝗏, Chief Webequie First Nation. I'm zooming in from the city of Thunder Bay this morning. It's good to be here this morning to participate on this important event today. So good morning, everybody. Good morning, Premier. Good morning, Minister. And good morning, everybody that's listening out there. Webequie First Nation is pleased to have reached a major milestone for the proposed terms of reference for the Northern Road Link project. The proposed TOR process will allow Indigenous views and voices, including Webequie's members, to be included in shaping the future environmental assessment. Marten Falls First Nation and Webequie First Nation are equal partners in this endeavor because the Northern Road Link project is located in our shared homelands. We know that this Indigenous-led environment is unique and the First Nation and first in Ontario. We appreciate the support of Ontario and their belief in our approach, our aspirations, and our partnerships. The proposed TOR will help generate the information for our communities to make an informed decision about developments in our area. Webequie First Nation, like so many other remote First Nations, have socio-economic challenges that we face every day. We also use our homelands for hunting, trapping, and harvesting to supplement our diet with protein from the land such as caribou, moose, geese, and berries. So we are very careful in our environmental stewardship responsibilities so that our traditional territories, sacred sites, and our cultural way of life are protected in the near future. At the same time, we have to balance our communities' needs for economic opportunities, such as job creation, business development, and partnership. Our youth need hope for the future, and our elders need assurance that their teachings hold true for the next generation. It is something every remote First Nation in Canada have to find their own balance between development and protection. Webequie First Nation and Marten Falls First Nation are using modern planning tools and have done Indigenous knowledge studies in the Ring of Fire to determine sustainable development areas and protected areas. We will continue to build on this work with Northern Road Link's future environmental assessment. That being said, Webequie is proud of this important milestone in collaboration with Marten Falls First Nation. The NRR project is Indigenous-led environmental assessment, which integrates Indigenous principles with regulatory process. We look forward to discuss the NRR project with our Indigenous neighbors and key stakeholders. I'm going to elaborate on this announcement in my own language. Webequie First Nation, Ingeminandam Ewitanokimatch, when I got Kagish tot when he Nando Kinjgevin. We got Otamangungum, Shinge going down to Sell no Maneke, Gay, Sinantan Dargan of 𝗦𝗂𝗀𝗺𝗂𝗀𝗺𝗃𝗀𝗃𝗀𝗃 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃 eminentemente 𝗥𝗲𝗳𝗊𝗀𝗺𝗀𝗃 𝗥𝗲𝗳𝗊𝗀𝗺𝗺 totamoin agwendaget umanake Ontario ingets eminentemente 𝗥𝗲𝗳𝗊𝗀𝗺 igwenog Ontario es 𝗥𝗲𝗳𝗊𝗀𝗺 𝗥𝗲𝗳𝗊𝗀𝗺 nenon gegonen kanantaintamangen 𝗥𝗲𝗳𝗊𝗀𝗺 Wega totamank gonjigi kendamen animangesh no kyangwet ni kishniga ani napange geshionen damangen gegonen animange dochgategen Wadi kiednun damen shingegon nandaindamen gegonen mishingana geshkamangen kaunjimat seguang egodesha wega totamank mimanike gionjiga geminuang nenon totamoinan kanandainjigang kawanigang egoge kanandainjigang kabachtangen nenon kagiminikuangen mijamanad nekegiad ng gayagen gewewene nanagat stumen kinagegon hogatot man kasi nanagat tuangen animanges matstang egoge kanawan damangen nenon totamoinan nenon kegonen gagabit tujgategen maneke igachi tujgategen egoge nachuinan chiganowan jgateg iwegan nandowan damank chi mikkamank aninigeshi tabitausik nenon anokinan egodashke nenon matchtaunen egogewitan nokimidrin dushknigimnanak epagosenda moatwed nekishnigan kegonjeniamak egogengichihamnanak enandaenda moat okinhomagerino chigabesenik wedibugishnigan kinabugwenenon kiwednon tawanen gagen ogagemek kano anigesuitan nakimitnano anigesi machtano anigegeshi kanenjigateg yegitotamoinan yegegitakimnan Webequie and Marten Falls Uitanokimituk Wnaqchikiwak Ekugiwatabat Tono Kendamaun and Snabe Kendamaun Animangesumat Tano Manake in the ring of fire Gajagatek Ekagi Wnaqchigategiwa Egotos Inge Imminentamen where as a copies can get Donachigana Uitanokimitank how the Marten Falls how to be Mawin where this northern movement Kajagatek Nandi Kinjigi Takonigatek and Snabio de Kito Egoge and Mitsubishi Nachigari Ego tashan eminent damank chiquitashin damangiban aninimangi gisunosik Webequie mangashi as we don't kiman. Amiga. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief Cornelius. Next up on our list, we have another special guest, Premier Doug Ford. Welcome, Premier Ford.
Well, thanks so much, Don, and good morning, everyone, and thank you for the comments, Chief Cornelius and Chief Bruce. On behalf of Minister Rickford, I'd just like to take a moment to acknowledge and thank, again, Chief Cornelius and Chief Bruce for their collaboration and partnership on this venture. And it's been a true partnership in every sense of the word and has brought us together for this landmark announcement. As our province becomes the global leader in building electric vehicles of the future, we're connecting industries, resources, and workers in the north to the auto and EV battery manufacturers in the south, so we can unlock the full economic potential of Northern Ontario. And we're working side by side with our Indigenous partners to ensure that communities around the Ring of Fire have access to the roads needed, not only to support development, but also to improve access to everyday essentials like fuel, groceries, and healthcare. That's why I'm so proud to have the Webequie and Marten Falls First Nations with us today to announce that they will be submitting terms of reference for the proposed Northern Road Link environmental assessment. The Northern Link roadway will be a vital transportation connection to the First Nation communities in the north, connecting them to the jobs and opportunities of tomorrow. Friends, working with our Indigenous partners, we are getting it done for Northern Ontario. Thank you, and now I'll pass it over to Minister Rickford.
Okay. Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you, Premier, for this extraordinary opportunity. Chief 𝗔𝗵𝗏𝗏 and Chief Wabasse, good to see and hear from both of you today. As the Premier said, this is an extraordinary milestone in a process that, in my view, has taken far too long up until the past couple of years, where the communities took leadership and committed to a process to arrive where we are today. The ability to move forward on the strength of terms of reference, reflecting the leadership and principles of the Indigenous communities to build what we're referring to for now as a corridor to prosperity, to unleash, as the Premier said, and unlock communities' potential, to be a supply corridor for not just the prospect, no pun intended, of development, but for energy corridors, for a roadway that will help move community members back and forth to city centers for other things like health services and economic activity. As somebody who has lived and worked in this area and a number of these communities in a former capacity as a nurse, I can tell you that this is transformative. And as Chief 𝗥𝗏𝗏𝗏 said moments ago, we are now in a position to get down to the real work, moving ever closer to starting the environmental assessment, and the prospect of a corridor to prosperity being built has never been closer. So I want to thank the leadership of the community, our Premier, for providing the opportunity from the provincial government side to engage so extensively with the leadership of the communities in this area. I know there are other communities that are getting just as excited about the prospect that we have here to open up this area of Northern Ontario and move together as full partners. Thank you, and 𝗥𝗏𝗏𝗏.
Thank you. 𝗥𝗏𝗏𝗏.
Thank you, Minister Rickford. That concludes the special announcement portion of today's live stream. I'd like to thank our special guests for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you again soon at our next milestone.
Absolutely.
We're counting on that.
I look forward to that. Thank you.
Before the next segment of our show, we would like to show you a couple of videos, the first of which talks about the aspirations the Webequie community members have for an outdoor arena. The second video captures a recent visit to the Marten Falls First Nation community by the project team. After the videos, we will come back and present the second part of our session on the contents of the environmental assessment proposed terms of reference. Thank you for joining us. 𝗥𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏.
Maple Leafs Basic, Red Wings, 𝗥𝗲𝗄𝗏.
Face-off will be in the lead zone at this end.
Red Wings 𝗥𝗲𝗄𝗏𝗏𝗏.
You can hear them. Grosso, Wares, Abel,
𝗥𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 Maple Leafs. 𝗥𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏.
and the
Don Met,
Mets
where
and
the
Don Mets.
Panigot
They're
Trevor
at back of their own net.
Panigot Nicke Abel Function. 𝗥𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 Panigot Mina 𝗥𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. Stewart. 𝗥𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. Stewart. 𝗥𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏.
For me, like my son will be in high school next year, and Well, me and my husband were talking about it still, like, it might be best for him to go to high school in Thunder Bay or anywhere instead of here because we don't have an arena and he wants to skate.
Actually, the old community of Webequie used to be a gathering place where all of the different families, while they were out during the winter, came back to the community, which was traditionally known as 𝗥𝗵𝗄𝗵𝗏, which means at the end of the lake. And this is where our community members used to gather.
Like I had to wear long johns, I had to wear a sweater, a hoodie on top, and put all my gear. Sometimes it wasn't that comfortable, but at least I played hockey. So.
I try usually keeping this rink good every day. Usually come out and shovel, trying to do the edges. Yeah.
Is it hard to do conditioner down here?
Yeah, it's usually very cold and windy.
Yeah?
And snowy.
So you have to go out of town to condition, or?
Yeah, I just was gonna try and leave to arena, but I can't get enough money.
Webequie is located roughly 527 kilometers away from Thunder Bay and is constantly told about the billions of dollars of value in their ring of fire.
We need an arena. Guys, look at it. Look at this whole place. It's filled with snow.
A market where people can sell their vegetables jogging, maybe track and field if possible, they can do that. Having a place where we can have either summer festivals or even winter carnivals, powwows, as well as hosting tournaments or even hosting regional conferences.
In particular this year, we're having issues with the weather, and also during the summer we don't have any place to go to, like when it's raining or anything like that. And it certainly would help to have an indoor sessions with the kids. You know, we need to be have them more active. And being active, you know, gives them less likely to get into trouble or get into other mischiefs, that type. And we're plagued with mischiefs nowadays.
I mean, like, it's really cold during the winters, and it'd be good for kids. Less flus going around. A place to hang out most of the time instead of causing trouble.
Since I've been here for 1965,
It's been a long time I've been here. And I have been working in the education department for over 20 years now. And it's been over 30 years we've been trying to get the indoor rink.
Because most of these young boys we have here, they dream of going on the NHL. But with the rink we have here, it's impossible to do so.
If you could get everything you wanted, what would you want?
A Zamboni and seats in the stands. That's all. And dressing rooms.
If we can get this building here, like, it would really have a major impact on these youth, especially the youth. And also maybe they can try something else like curling in there, and say for the summertime they would play floor hockey there, play volleyball, or they can use that space for like dryland training and jogging around.
And I lost my oldest a couple of years ago, but he was really into hockey. When he started skating when he was 3 years old, 4 years old, it didn't matter if it was blowing snow, -40, 30, for him to go skating. I know he had a couple of frostbites too.
Don met where the panigot the 𝗔𝗽𝗶𝗀𝗺𝗊 panigot the 𝗥𝗲𝗊𝗿 man the panigot mina and give it you steward. Panigot give it
That's the stuff you do in order for you to play hockey. Like, there's a bunch of us young, same age as me, a bunch of us there, traveling out on the winter roads just to go play indoors.
I want an arena.
Yeah, we used to travel out to the nearby communities by skidoos.
Oh yeah, to go play?
Yeah. Closest one would probably be 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏.
Okay.
So we would drive out a couple of buddies of mine, maybe like 5 skidoos. We get people to hop on the sleds.
So we could skate all day. So it won't be windy. And so we won't be cold.
What do you think about skating? Is it hard on your lungs to skate here? Tell me about what it's like to be skating -20.
It's hard to explain, but all I can say is it feels great.
And I'd like to see it being built in Webequie as quickly as possible, because the arena can't be used during the winter time and also during the summertime.
You want an arena?
Yeah. It's cold out here.
We lose a lot of young people too. On suicides, we have lost a lot of youths from the past. That's the reason I'm saying, and probably it's been said out already what I'm talking about. All I'm saying is nobody shouldn't be left out whatsoever.
Second, hi Sonny. What do you want to be when you grow up?
A police officer.
Police officer.
I'd like the county to go ahead and do his presentation. Welcome everybody coming in today, being part of the meeting.
A teacher?
Again, a lot of work has already gone into that, including a lot of feedback from our own Lawrence Baxter and others, providing input on guiding that.
So as Qasim indicated, I'm gonna talk about the Marten Falls Access Road project and provide an update on the environmental assessment in terms of where we're at and
Consider bringing fire to our ancestral area, so we don't. We hope that we can resolve things with our First Nations.
See you tomorrow, Chief. Take care. Thank you so much.
Working with government and industry and other First Nations, we find a way to work on those issues that we have or that they may have.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Don Parkinson, and I'd like to welcome you back to another in our series of NRL live streaming sessions and radio shows. Every other week on Wednesdays, on Wednesdays between 4:30 and 5 p.m., this is a special presentation. We will discuss a new topic and want to encourage you to provide us with as much input as possible by calling or texting us with your questions or comments. You can call or text us toll-free at 1-844-424-0500. That's 1-844-424-0500. And just to remind our viewers and listeners, we are doing these radio shows and streaming sessions to help community members and the general public get a better understanding of what's involved in both the federal impact assessment and provincial environmental assessment processes, and encourage viewers and listeners to participate in these two activities. With me today, live and in person, is my usual co-host, Mr. Qasim Siddiq. And Qasim is the project co-lead for the Northern Road Link project. Good morning, Qasim. Sorry, I'm discombobulated here by the
what a
change of time.
Yeah, what a change indeed, Don. Good morning to you as well.
Thank you,
Yeah.
thank you, and that reminds me again that it's morning, which is appreciated.
Absolutely,
So,
that's what I'm here for.
yes,
Yeah.
well, you do a wonderful job at it, Qasim.
Thank you, Don. You as well.
So in today's session called the Proposed Environmental Assessment, Terms of Reference, Part 2, we are going to finish off our discussion of the components of the proposed terms of reference. Okay, Qasim, let's get started. Maybe you can do a quick run-through of what we are going to cover today, because we have a number of topics to cover today, don't we?
We absolutely do, Don. And switching gears from, I think the most sort of special streaming session we've had to date. I had the honor of hosting both Chief Achneepineskum and Chief Wabasse for our big announcement at the project level, and really delighted to have Premier Ford and Minister Rickford join to show their support for the project overall. But the tour is now officially coming out. The proposed tour is being released for public comments at the end of the month on the 29th of April. And that's the date we promised yesterday we would be providing that. So
significant milestone.
Absolutely is. It a lot of work, a lot of good, strong conversations have gone into it. I certainly want to thank all the Indigenous communities, the neighboring members of public government agencies and ministries who've taken the time to provide comments on the draft terms of reference, which is released in November 2021. So today we'll talk a little bit about the next step, which is the proposed terms of reference that's being submitted to the regulator, the provincial regulator, who happens to be the Ministry of Environment, MECP. So today we'll talk a little bit about an overview of the tour process flow, what that is and where are we in that. Pretty much at the final stages before it goes to the regulator and the minister for decision. So we'll describe again what is the proposed tour, what is the difference between a draft and this milestone, which is called the proposed tour. Talk a little bit about the components of the proposed tour, which is the purpose of this session. So we described the initial parts of a tour. Today we talk about sections that describe consultation and engagement, Indigenous knowledge, assessment methods, environmental effects assessment, climate change assessment, commitments and monitoring, and then flexibility to accommodate new circumstances should they come up. And of course, as always, the last part is contact information. If anyone wishes to get in touch with us after the stream, that information will be provided as well, Don.
Thank you, Qasim. And let's start now with a high-level review of exactly where we are in the tour process. If our technical team can bring up slide number 3 on the screen. That would be much easier and help me explain where we are now. So you'll notice on this graphic, the notice of submission of tour, spring-summer 2022. So the tour, the proposed tour will be submitted, then it goes through a review period. The team will respond to comments and incorporate feedback. And then the finalized proposed tour that's responded to that public input will then be submitted to the minister for a decision where it will either be accepted with changes, or rejected. So maybe now, Qasim, you can go through exactly what a proposed tour is.
Absolutely, Don. Just as a reminder for our audience, the environmental assessment terms of reference, or TOR, is essentially just a work plan. It describes the work that will happen in the environmental assessment stage of the process. So this is, even though it is an initial stage in the project, it is quite a fundamental part of the entire process because it describes the rest of the process and the work that has to be done. And it does take a little bit of time because it requires the compilation of background information, material, initial conceptions of the project, but then having broad conversations with neighboring communities and with members of the public on the project. So we did that, in which the draft tour, the first version of the tour, was released back in November for comments from neighboring Indigenous communities, members of the public, regulators, government ministries, and agencies. We provided a number of weeks for people to have that initial review, and that is a voluntary step in the process. It doesn't always take place, but it provides an early opportunity for people to have a look at what the draft is, and for those who don't have that opportunity or time or resources at the time, for them to be able to plan for the main milestone, which is the main regulatory step, the release of the current version, which is now called the proposed tour. This is where the regulator starts the official process, and comments basically go back to MECP as MECP makes the project tour available for formal review and comment. So that's one of the fundamental differences between the draft, which was a voluntary process, doesn't necessarily happen for every project. And now we're in the regulatory step, which is the proposed tour, where the regulator is responsible for receiving comments, and then as the project team, we provide responses to those questions as they come up. Now, once that proposed tour is complete, the comment period has come to an end. The proposed tour, the revised version, based on responses to the comments received, goes to the minister for a decision. And the decision could be either accepted with changes, or it could also be rejected. So those are the options available to the minister, Don, and it would be a number of weeks before we know what that decision is.
Thank you for that, Qasim. And let me just remind our viewers and listeners, you can call or text us toll-free at 1-844-424-0500. That's 1-844-424-0500. So let's now look at the contents of the proposed tour by going through its component sections. So if our team can change to slide number 5, which they have, 2 weeks ago, just over 2 weeks ago, we covered the first 3 sections of the proposed terms of reference. Those were introduction, description of and rationale for alternatives, as well as description of the project. Today, our discussion is going to focus on consultation and engagement, Indigenous knowledge, assessment methods, that's effects assessment methods, environmental effects assessment, climate change assessment, commitments and monitoring, and finally, and Qasim mentioned this before, flexibility to accommodate new circumstances. Qasim, let's look at the next key component of the proposed tour that we want to discuss, and that's consultation and engagement.
So this is such a key component of the entire process, really, and dare I say, perhaps in my opinion, the most important, which is consultation and engagement on the project with neighboring Indigenous communities, with members of the public, and with government agencies and ministries. So in the tour, there's a description of the purpose of that consultation activity, the objectives you're trying to reach with it, and principles related with that consultation effort. So within the tour, you also go through a process of identifying those parties, entities, individuals who are to be consulted. So this includes an identification of indigenous communities and stakeholders, includes an identification of government agencies, federally, provincially, municipally, and then the public and general stakeholders in and around the project area. There's a description of communication and engagement tools. How would that engagement be done? So the how of engagement and consultation is provided in the tour. There's a description of how the project proposes to resolve issues and related resolution. How are issues recognized, and then how are they resolved in the environmental assessment process? Now, all of this activity on engagement, consultation, the conversations we have, the presentations we make, the comments we receive, the responses ultimately we provide are recorded in a record of consultation, and that is described in the tour as well. And then finally, a description of the consultation activities that took place for the tour itself. So there's an opportunity to summarize and describe those activities. So that's the section on consultation and engagement on.
Thank you, Qasim. And as you said, that's a critical section of the proposed tour. The next section of the proposed tour we want to talk about is almost as important, and that's the, if not as important, and that's the Indigenous knowledge section. And previously, in environmental assessments and impact assessments, Indigenous knowledge was typically put in a separate section, and it wasn't really integrated into the actual report. But things have changed now, and the expectation by the regulators, both federal and provincial, is that Indigenous knowledge be included in all of the types of studies that are done as part of an environmental assessment or an impact assessment. So in the proposed tour under Indigenous knowledge, what we do is we give a sort of a high-level description of the Indigenous knowledge program, the program to visit communities, collect Indigenous knowledge relevant to the project that we can use to because it enriches the project itself. Because it's you know, and we can get into this, we've gotten into this before in previous sessions, you know, it's a combination of that Indigenous knowledge with the Western science that helps us establish a very sort of accurate baseline, which is critical in terms of being able to predict potential effects as we move forward in the project. Also in that section is a description of some of the activities, whether they be Indigenous knowledge sharing agreements, capacity funding, timelines, or any existing data that might be made available by communities to add to the study. So another important section, Qasim, without question. And maybe now you can go through another key part of the alternative section, and that's the assessment methods, effects assessment methods, I should say.
And those are the nuts and bolts of the process itself, Don, which is the assessment part of the environmental assessment. So in the tour, the focus is on describing assessment of alternative methods, the way that assessment will be conducted. But the actual assessment takes place in the environmental assessment part of the environmental assessment, which basically means at this stage we just describe the way that assessment will happen, and then the actual assessment happens once the tour is either accepted or accepted with changes. And that's when we start to look at the preferred methods as a whole that constitute the entire project. So effects assessment for the project will be completed on that preferred as it emerges in the environmental assessment part. In the tour stage, you know, we've described a number of alternatives, but we don't actually assess them. We don't know which would be the preferred alternative because all the studies have to be conducted within the environmental assessment. So they get done, and out of that process emerges the preferred, and then you look at the effects of that preferred in the environmental assessment. So specifically, on slide 9, if we could move on to slide 9, the methods used for describing the environment and effects assessment, they include selection and scoping of valued components. So valued components are basically the different items that you assess in the natural environment, people, culturally. So those are the things that actually get assessed. For example, fish, or the economy of the local place. Then you characterize the baseline conditions. What does the environment, both physically and the cultural and socioeconomic environment of the project area look like? You have to describe that. Number of studies are done to that effect, Don. Identification of project VC interaction and potential effects. That how does the project affect the valued components that we're assessing in the environmental assessment? Then once you understand that, you want to talk about how can you reduce those effects, or mitigation methods, selection of mitigation measures. How do you reduce the potential effect on those valued components? Once that is discussed, you also look at cumulative effects of the project, not just within the project footprint itself, but significantly beyond it, things that might happen as a result of the project. And I think we're going to have quite a big catchment area temporally and physically for that, looking at the foreseeable future, everything that can be forecasted, and pretty much everything around the project will become a part of the cumulative effects assessment. And then lastly, even after we've talked about how we mitigate impacts, you're still potentially left with residual effects. So you need to talk about follow-up commitments. What are the commitments to follow up on those impacts, those residual impacts, and what type of monitoring programs would come to be. So this is the overall assessment method section, Don.
There's a lot of activities in this. The actual assessment of the synthesis of all that data collected. It's a critical part of the proposed tour. Let's now move to the next component of the proposed tour, and that's the environmental effects assessment. So we've sort of touched on this a little bit. This would include sort of preliminary information on what we call indicators. Indicators, Qasim earlier talked about valued components or criteria. Indicators are ways of measuring things. So if you talk about fish and fish habitat, for example, the indicators are ways of measuring, whether it's population changes, things like that. It's just a way to measure potential impacts. It also includes, the environmental effects assessment also includes baseline characterization, like I was talking about before, and potential project-related effects for each valued component. Another way to look at valued components is, from a community level, it's the things that are important to community members. What's important to them? Clean water, fish habitat, healthy caribou and moose populations. Those are examples of valued components. And then, again, because it's a terms of reference, there is a lot of background work that's done. So there's a preliminary list of background information and data for each valued component as well, too. So there's a lot of work that's done in the preparation of the proposed tour, as you were talking about before, Qasim. Now, included in that is a rationale for including preliminary indicators, those ways of measuring impacts of each VC. And preliminary valued components are organized into groups, and they're organized by Aboriginal treaty rights and interests, physical environment, biological environment, socioeconomic environment, archaeological and cultural heritage resources, and human health. So these VCs, these valued components, are grouped together under different headings. Qasim, maybe now you can talk a little bit about another key component, and one that we hear about more and more, as you know, that's climate change assessment.
most certainly, Don. It's a conversation that's becoming more and more important, you know, of course, at the project level, but provincially, nationally, and globally as well. And as a result, it is a really important conversation for us, which is a climate change assessment. So within a climate change assessment, there are three main considerations in the project. The first one is the impact of the project on climate change. And then the second part is vice versa, which is the impact of climate change on the project. So that's an interesting sort of distinction that, you know, you're looking at the effect on both sides, which is how does the project impact climate change? You know, for example, things like greenhouse gas emissions related to construction, commissioning, operation and maintenance. You look at the entire sort of life cycle of the predicted life cycle of the project, I should say. And then you also consider the impacts of climate change. So you do a climate change resilience assessment on the access road corridor and supporting infrastructure, because a lot of this road will, as we know, everything around the region is being impacted by climate change, Don. So there will be an effect on the road itself. And how does the road stand up to that? So that is considered. Lastly, identifying and minimizing negative climate change impacts during the implementation of the project, that is considered as well. So those are the overall considerations around climate change assessment during the EA stage, Don.
And Qasim, this section, as you touched on, is getting more and more important, isn't it? Because it's just becoming more and more of a consideration. And you know, already we have seen in this project the kinds of considerations for climate change. I mean, we look at what's happening with communities in this region, and the winter road season is shrinking.
And that's been one of the big drivers for the communities to step up and say, you know, of course the conditions as they were never acceptable to begin with. But you know, as a remote community that's not connected to anything, your one lifeline in the past was that winter road, and there was a certain level of dependability around it. Yeah. That dependability is gone. Some years you've got a really short window, other years you don't. So it yo-yos, and you just never know what to expect. So we know climate change is already significantly impacting the region.
And it has, you know, that winter road season, that shrinking winter road season has huge impacts on community members. It has impacts on the price of goods, of groceries, and fuel costs as well too, because of the additional transportation costs. It's a significant factor, which just underlines the importance of that section on climate change assessment. The next component of the proposed tour is what we call commitments and monitoring. And in the course of conducting an EA, a comprehensive list of commitments is assembled. And then associated with those commitments is how those commitments will be actually turned into real actions. These commitments might relate to different phases of the project, such as the construction phase, the operations phase, maintenance phase. It could include mitigation measures, ways of limiting impacts as well. They may relate to additional consultation or engagement at these different phases after the core environmental assessment has been completed, and then what we call compliance monitoring, checking to make sure that impacts sit within what is expected. So the proponent during this part of the work would prepare what we call a monitoring framework or strategy, and so this is developed sort of as the EA runs along, and then gets more and more detailed as it gets closer to completion. And then this framework for monitoring occurs for each project phase. So each phase is considered different. So that could be construction, operations, and it would include monitoring of decommissioning of certain infrastructure elements, such as access roads to temporary sources of construction materials like gravel pits or quarries. So anything that was sort of temporary that is going to be rehabilitated, there would be a framework a monitoring framework that would be prepared for it. So it's a critical part of, and again, it appears more at the end. It just grows with time as the EA moves along. Qasim, maybe you can tell us now a little bit about the final, but certainly not the least important component of the proposed tour, and that's the flexibility to accommodate new circumstances.
So this, I think one way to sort of frame the flexibility to accommodate new circumstances section is to be practical and realistic about the stage that the project is in. And the stage that the project is in right now is sort of at a conceptual level of design information, and it doesn't represent the final design, location, and scope of the proposed undertaking. So there is an allowance for some minor variation in the process as you go on, because we know what we know right now, and we will be collecting a ton of information and data, the baseline conditions, studies that we talked about just a few minutes ago. All of that information will become in the future. So we don't have that data and information today. We have historical background information and data that's been collected over the years, but we don't have all the information that we will come to have in the process. Yes. So based on that information, based on the baseline conditions, based on our need and want to avoid sensitive areas, either that's ecological sensitivity or those are important and culturally significant sites for local communities, for Marten Falls, for Webequie, for other neighboring communities, in our attempt to avoid and mitigate potential effects. There might be engineering needs around construction because of which the road has to move a little bit. So when you get all of that information, the project might look a little different. So that's why the term is minor variance or modification. It's not a significant change in the project. So Don, I don't believe through this section we can go from a road to a rail, for example.
No, I don't think we can.
No, I don't think so either. So it enables us to make those practical small changes as requirements emerge. And this section recognizes that and sort of describes the process through which that happens. And that is the final section in the proposed tour.
That is correct. And maybe, Qasim, you can explain how to contact our project team.
Absolutely. So you can reach us always. The easiest way is by through the website at northernroadlink.ca. You have all the contact information over there, but if you prefer email, it is info@northernroadlink.com. The phone number is 1-888-515-3607. And again, it's the website is northernroadlink.ca, and you can contact us directly through the website. You can reach out by email, by phone, and as always, these sessions are bi-weekly at this stage. We're always available for in-person meetings as well. So if you have an opportunity at the community level, or there's some sort of an event and you think the stakeholders or community members would prefer to hear us in person, we would always be delighted to come in person as well.
And this was a great session today, wasn't it, Qasim? I mean, the announcement at the beginning is exciting. The whole team's been working very hard, and it was a big milestone for everyone. So this has been our most notable, I would say, streaming session. I mean, they're all notable, aren't they, Qasim? But this one just slightly more than the others.
They really are, and there aren't many opportunities like this these days, Don, where we get to sit sort of next to each other. But the world has fortunately gone on, and we were able to do the work that we needed to do. But we're hoping we could do more of these. But practical realities as well. There's just something about having that flexibility and being able to work from home as well. So I think we might mix it up in the future.
I think we will, but we can't wait to visit your communities and look forward to that hopefully in the near future. That wraps up today's NRL discussion. Thank you as always, Qasim, for sharing your thoughts on this proposed tour discussion. I hope our viewers and listeners are beginning to have a clearer idea of what exactly is in the proposed tour document, and please join us again in 2 weeks when we continue our discussions on the project. I think we're going to begin talking about field studies. So that'll be exciting. Maybe we'll bring in a few special guest specialists who are doing some of the field work for us too. So don't forget to visit our website at northernroadlink.ca or follow us on social media via NRL Roadlink. Miigwech, thank you for joining us, and see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you.